This episode of Troxel is supported by Avail. Content is more than Revit families. If it's digital, Avail can handle it. Learn more at getavail.com. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. This is the podcast where I have conversations with guests from the architectural community and beyond to talk about the coevolution of architecture and technology. In this episode, I welcome Jordan Rogove and Wayne Norbeck. They helm two companies, Live Connected and DXA Studio in New York City. Jordan is the Chief Operating Officer of Live Connected and co-founder of DXA Studio. And Wayne is the Director of Design and Business Strategy at Live Connected and is also a co-founding partner at DXA. In this episode, we discuss using prefab modular as a strategy for the delivery of productized architecture, how architecture can save people's lives, the volumetric modular system that they've developed, the benefits of prefab, the value of their tight collaboration with a dedicated and experienced fabrication outfit, the importance of creating a sense of purpose in their work, and I have a bit of a soapbox moment at the end that came right out of my flow state in the conversation, so I hope you make it all the way through. This was a fantastic conversation with these guys, and I hope you'll not only find value in it for yourself, but that you'll help add value to the profession by sharing it with your network. You can really help me out also by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to help other people find it. I would also appreciate you visiting the sponsor who is helping make this episode possible. Thank you so much. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Jordan Rogove and Wayne Norbeck. Jordan and Wayne, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you guys again.
Yeah, great to be here.
So we met in Chicago at the AIA conference officially, which was cool to be back in person and obviously meet new people. So we were on the riverboat cruise that Fair Game Media hosted along with Bob Borson and Andrew Hawkins from Life of an Architect podcast. So that was cool that, you know, I'm a podcaster, Bob and Andrew are podcasters, and then obviously Amanda at Fair Game knows that. And she's like, you guys, you have to meet Jordan and Wayne. And so, or maybe it's Wayne and Jordan. You guys can sort that out.
Yeah. Either way.
The idea of having you on the show really comes from what you're doing with, you know, and I don't know how to frame this. I'm going to let you frame it, but this Live Connected thing that you're doing. And so I would love it if you guys could kind of tell the story. And I don't know how you're going to negotiate this between the two of you, who gets to tell what part, but how did you get to here? Like what lead us from maybe more of a traditional practice, because I'm assuming that that's where you came from, into where you're at today with DXA Studio and Live Connected?
Sure thing. Wayne and I met in school at Virginia Tech years and years ago, and we were both practicing in New York City. I was at Aldo Rossi's old studio, which became Morris Adjemi Architects, and Wayne was first at Gluckman Manor. Is that right, Wayne?
Yeah, 10 Architectos and then Gluckman Manor Architects here in New York.
Got it. So we were both in New York, and we crossed paths, and we started doing a series of competitions, and we started winning a lot of competitions, and then we opened our, as you said, more traditional architecture office to get started. And that we're actually just celebrating our 10-year anniversary of DXA Studio, our architecture firm. And a quick book plug, but we released a book celebrating that 10th anniversary called DXA NYC, and that explores kind of a relationship between New York City's history and its architecture, and a kind of unique relationship to architecture. So anyway, so yes, we come from a more kind of traditional architecture background. We started a firm. We're kind of in the mid-30s, kind of medium-sized office. And one of the things we did, like right out of the bat, as I mentioned, we were doing competitions, and we won a competition for housing in Haiti. And that followed almost immediately after the big earthquake 10 years ago. And what we saw happen there was kind of this conversation about intersection of health and well-being and architecture in the built environment, and just how much the built environment affects health and well-being, and that kind of correlation. And we also saw the power of doing these types of projects, these pro bono projects, where we meet like fascinating people, and just like it just opened so many doors. And it was such an amazing experience going down to Haiti repeatedly and working on that project. And so that was kind of like the first taste of just seeing what the power of architecture is when it comes to helping people heal, like come back from an earthquake. Our partner down there was helping people with HIV/AIDS. Kind of, there's a big stigma down in Haiti. It's kind of like a voodoo background that you got AIDS because you deserve it kind of thing. And so we did kind of housing for 75 people down there, diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. And there was a really kind of scary instance of co-infection with TB. Tuberculosis is quite common down there. So like when that happens, it's like an 85% like fatality rate, just like terrifying numbers. And so we started thinking about how you design something that can be locally sourced, easily repeated, and can help people kind of like prevent, like just try to, use passive ventilation and different, basic technologies to help people avoid that sort of fate. So anyway, we were kind of hooked at this idea that architecture can really save people's lives, just like thoughtful design, just that simple.
Yeah, and that also led to a project in Namibia where we worked with a group of technicians down there that we were training to go in and do work on about 1,500 structures along the northern border of Namibia to eradicate malaria and other vector-borne diseases. And so that those two projects were really kind of launched this idea of like health and well-being in our firm, and have been seeing that evolve over time.
So that coupled with my father's a physician, and we had long talked about, he was kind of a pioneer in telemedicine. We all thought he was insane. He's like, oh yeah, we're going to have these robots treat people, or yeah, they could get on a computer screen and talk to their doctor. We're like, that's ridiculous. And, that's like 15 years ago. And now it just seems super prescient, that the telemedicine has actually evolved into like a really worthwhile thing, and has helped a lot of people gain almost immediate access to like physician consultation. And so he and I had a conversation about how do you take some of these like nascent technologies and integrate them into the built environment to benefit people. And so that is the Wayne in my work, and then my father and my conversation kind of like led to this idea for Live Connected. And then the pandemic really just sent us like, at 100 miles an hour, with the additional kind of time and resources that we were afforded, with a little bit of a slowdown in the industry. And then the kind of fourth person that we brought in is Wayne and I teach down at Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech has been at the forefront of modular and kind of solar house design. They've won repeated solar decathlons, if you're familiar with those. And so Joe Wheeler, who's headed that initiative at Virginia Tech, is our fourth partner. And he brings 20 plus years of an understanding of modular construction and just really thoughtful kind of outside the box approach to how modular might work. And so that was kind of the evolution. And then the kind of final piece is, after you have a practice for 10 years, you're like, how do I do projects that don't require clients? And so like it puts us in the driver's seat where we can essentially develop and find opportunities with the modular housing that we've developed to help communities, which I'm sure we'll get into, as the podcast goes on here.
I love how you said you how can we not have clients?
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, it comes up on the show a lot, which is this whole idea of there's other business models out there, right? And there's so many people just unwilling to look beyond the way we've always practiced, or the way that we currently practice, to kind of put it into two buckets. And then there's like this what if, and there's an aversion to risk, right? With different business models. Like you said, you guys kind of I don't know, you just kind of found yourself here because of the weird convergence of all of these different things. And so it's not like that just happens for everyone. Were you looking for another business model before that? Or was this more just purely in a reaction to like, holy crap, no one's buying our services anymore because of the pandemic and there's so much uncertainty?
No, we were looking before. Like we think there's a lot that's positive about the profession. First of all, we're hooked. Like we love architecture. Don't get us wrong. But I think the model, that we have right now, there's a lot of things that we're not crazy about. This like hyper specialization and like kind of bifurcation of like parts of the design, kind of an interior designer, a design architect, an executive architect, and it just like waters down the product, right? And so we've been fighting that since we opened our doors, trying to be a one-stop shop where we provide all of those services and like kind of a singular vision to the project. So that's been our first kind of attempt to disrupt how things are done in New York. We've kind of thought about opportunities of developing projects. We looked really hard at the city of Detroit, saw amazing opportunities out there. And then that was kind of a more traditional kind of like developer type role, which didn't interest us as much as something that was like kind of like a more like a stronger blend of the two. And so this kind of like naturally fit that. This is like we're making something that in a way that nobody else has. There's lots of people that have like preceded us in making modular, and we've studied a lot of the successes and failures, more failures than success in that field. And we thought, hey, this is the perfect mix, right? It's a perfect mix because there's like a lot of design. One thing that we've always been concerned about architecture is just like the clients, like it's something like startling, like only 2% of all buildings built are done by architects, right?
I think it's 1%. Yeah.
1%, even worse. Right. All right. And so the idea that there's this exclusivity to what we do is kind of like so counter to the way we try to practice. And so inherent in doing this modular construction is like developing a much broader audience and bringing like our skills and the things that we love to do to people that would never go out and hire an architect, right? Like who's got that kind of income? It's only the upper tier of the upper tier that's willing to oftentimes hire an architect. So we love the thought that you could do that, and we love the thought that we can basically create like communities within months instead of years. And with the housing crisis, like it just all kind of started to fit together. It's like the stuff we were working on, it just became clear. And that was the founding of our firm, DXA. It's like it was just so clear we needed to start to practice then and there, winning the competitions and getting all these calls. So the clarity of this and the sense of purpose and kind of duty was immediately apparent, especially come March of 2020.
Yeah. And to build on that a little bit, with traditional practice, you really have a separate separation of like the owner, the architect, contractor. And there's a lot of excess dynamics that go into that, which make it far more complicated to be able to put a good project together. So this represents a really interesting opportunity to kind of combine all of those things, and in particular to work really closely with a great fabricator. And that process of going back and forth to really refine the design, all the technical aspects of the project, and to really think about like the business model of how to achieve a really effective cost for the products, so to speak. That's been a really enjoyable process, which we don't always get into in such a seamless way in our other work.
So this whole idea of productized architecture, Wayne, can you give us a definition of what Live Connected actually is? So we've kind of skirted around the actual product that you guys are offering. So kind of just lay that out in front so that the audience understands exactly, because they're probably not going to your website just yet, right? Based on this conversation, but I want, before they do, just paint that picture.
Yeah. I mean, in a really simple way, what we're trying to do is provide access to housing in a much more seamless way for people. So, the normal process, if you want to build a house, is to hire an architect, find a site, go through this very lengthy process of approvals and so forth. And that can take, it can take a year, 2 years, 3 years for people. It becomes a very daunting process with a lot of financial resources that there's a lot of complexity with. What we're offering is more like, almost think about having a house is like the experience of buying a car. You can go onto a website, order up the house. It's configurable. You can select different finishes and so forth. And then that goes out to the fabricator. We get that built in almost like a few weeks, and then it goes out to the site. And when it gets out to site, you can build these things within a few hours. And that's really like the magic of Live Connected. That's a model we call the Connexus model. We also have a separate line which is tiny homes called the Via, and both of those are really to provide the kind of high quality rapid housing for a wide array of people.
Awesome. This whole idea of configurators and, like the Tesla configurator online, like this is shopping nowadays. And I've always thought of people buy houses like they shop for other things. Like a car is a great example because it's expensive, right? It's on one of the larger things that people buy. And when people, it's not even in their brain to go look for an architect and go through that just undeniably hectic, risky process of the design process, acquiring the land, permitting, dealing with this weird triangle that you mentioned, right? Contractor, architect, owner, all of the, the financial stuff that they have to navigate. And it's just like, no, I'm just going to go look for a house, right? Because it's like, it's on Zillow.com, right? And that's how people shop for shelter. And thinking of that as like, we are leaving so much on the table as architects, as a profession. I mean, you said it, Jordan, 1%, 2%, whatever the number is, it's a tiny, tiny percent, right? So we're leaving so much on the table here as a profession, as an industry, as a building industry. There's 99% of the other needs out there that are not being met from the architectural standpoint, right? So offering something like this, it's not a new idea, right? But I'm wondering how you guys found success early on that just said, yep, this is the direction we're going to go. What kind of started to make sense for you guys in this way? Who was buying it? How often were they buying it? Like what proved it to you that it was a model worth pursuing?
Well, I would build upon the question, kind of the technology, what's different about Live Connected. So one of the things that kind of sold us on the idea right away is like one of the most basic things. It's that when you think about all, like, 99% of all the modular that preceded it, we kind of came up with a name for it. We call it like spatial or volumetric modular, where you're shipping a bunch of empty space, right? Like almost all modular is like on this wide load on the back of a truck, and it would get shipped to a place, hoisted, craned, lulled in place, whatever device. But all the while it was shipped empty, and like the parameters of it, the dimensions made it incredibly expensive to ship. It made it almost like localized, like you would have to ship within 250 to 500 miles of the plant because you've got to shut down some roads, you've got to get permits and all of that. And so the approach is really different than that, is that we flat pack as much as we can. And we've got these cartridges, which we call it the click system. It's basically a bathroom, a kitchen, like all of the series of cartridges that you lay out on the grade beams, and then they click together. And that's it. And as Wayne said, we can build these houses in 4 hours, and they are watertight. It's a whole kit of parts. And so we made everything as basic as possible so that you could use local labor for assembly and try to kind of, again, invest in the communities in which you're building these. And so with just that simple way of looking differently at how modular is done, we thought, this is amazing. We can have one plant and ship it anywhere in the country on a normal flatbed truck without professional drivers and at a fraction of the cost, right? A lot of the modular companies would open scattered across the United States so that they're close and they can close down those roads. We're like, we don't have to do that. So we don't have a scalability issue. We don't have an over extension of of an organic development of a business. And so when we looked at it, we're just like, this is too good of an idea not to go full bore into. And then we tested the waters. We got an RFP from the state of Texas. There are all these coastal areas and states that have just had enough of the FEMA trailers, understandably so, right? And they're looking for a modular solution for either temporary or permanent housing in that same kind of cost range. And so we put the Connexus to the test and just kind of scaled it back from kind of a market rate version, and are a finalist in that process. In fact, we met with them today, and that would be a tremendously gratifying professional moment to help people never have to live in those trailers after a hurricane or any sort of natural disaster, because those are soul crushing little like human storage vessels. And so we see a lot of value, like give somebody a beautiful home the day after something as dramatic as that, and they will help the healing. To have a dignified place like on day one will help people recover. And so that to us is kind of like a noble, a noble prospect. And so when you couple those opportunities and that approach, we just thought this is a can't miss kind of opportunity for us.
I've been through kind of a little bit of a prefab feasibility study, as it were, previous places that I've worked. And usually it comes up in a couple of categories. There's kind of this panelized system, and then there's this, like you said, volumetric modular kind of system. And the panelized system is, I assume it's similar to your cartridge idea, but I haven't exactly seen the cartridge idea. I assume it's maybe a hybrid or something. But the idea of panels getting shipped to a site in a very flat, that it makes logistics way easier. Whereas like this volumetric prefab idea is much, the modular is way more about starting with logistics. And you said you don't even need professional drivers to deliver this. So that seems to me like one of the game changers for you, at least, was to actually be able to address these issues at scale. That was another design problem that you basically took on and solved.
Yeah. And just to talk a little bit about the evolution from a panelized system, that where we're a bit different is, I think a lot of those panelized systems are sort of wall components that come out, but then once you get to site, you need to come in and do all the drywall work, do all the exterior waterproofing and sheathing and final finishes on site. And even a lot of the volumetric companies are like that too. They kind of bring the shell out and then you're finishing everything out there. Our whole thing was to think of it like, once you get on the site, absolute minimum amount of work that needs to be done. So all the finishes, that whole strategy of the interior is already baked in. We use pre-finished wood panels or plywood panels for the whole interior aesthetic. And then on the outside, we already have the roofing, we already have the cladding integrated, and we've come up with really clever ways of being able to connect the panels and then come in and cap things, even with the way that the utilities are run. So it's that ability to get out on site and really within like a day or so have the thing ready to be lived in, which is really the distinctive feature.
That's great. This whole idea of designing the whole process and thinking with kind of those different perspectives in mind of who's going to do the work, who's doing the installation. Do we have to train them? Is it our crew? Is it a localized crew to wherever the site is? All of that stuff just takes kind of a depth to it. What was that process like for you guys to go through? Because again, kind of coming from a more traditional practice, did you bring in people that already knew somewhat how to do this, or did you have to kind of figure it all out from scratch as you went along?
Well, the first big move that we made was reaching out to different modular companies and just talking to them about, what their philosophy is, how they practice. And we, the people that we talked to were like, this is how we do it, and we're not going to change. This is how you build modular. And it was like just horrendous. It was like too low quality. There's like an absence of imagination and willingness to, explore innovation. And so we made a pivot, which was also pandemic related, that I had worked with a group called Atomic in Pennsylvania that we did traveling rock shows and MTV Unplugs and, all manner of like set design and production design. And so these guys were amazing in designing something rapidly, like incredibly talented engineers, electricians, carpenters, could build it, ship it in like no space, and then erect it immediately. And I was just like, these are the guys. Like, these are the guys. They're open to anything. I mean, they get a call we need a show tomorrow morning in New York City, and like boom, 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 everyone stays up and bangs it out. And so they, with the pandemic and the live entertainment industry just kind of hitting pause, they had 160 people ready to go. And we called them, and like the next day we were working out terms of like an agreement, like a manufacturing agreement. And so they have been phenomenal on the logistics side, because they're doing, the Super Bowl halftime show, or the VMAs. And so they ship anywhere. And then Joe Wheeler, our co-professor down at Virginia Tech, he's got 20 years of thinking about this inside out. So when you put the Live group together with the Atomic group, the conversations went from, the first pencil sketch to, building this thing and having people move in, and every kind of step in between. I think the biggest hurdle for us has been like kind of government municipal approvals. And like, that's been a slow burn, right? Getting building codes to really adjust and adapt to these types of shifts in technology. And there's still so much out there that prevents like really good housing from happening. And so we're seeing more and more that a good chunk of our time, efforts, and resources are going to go to trying to reform that, like talking to government officials, lobbying, publishing white papers, explaining the folly of some of the kind of zoning and building code requirements that get in the way of really thoughtful, inexpensive design that would like help millions of people. It's just like, it's antiquated and frankly just foolish in a lot of cases. So well-intentioned, but like problematic for kind of the future of development.
Anything to add to that, Wayne?
I think, just to echo what Jordan was saying about the process of working with Atomic, it's been really cool because they design things to such a high degree of accuracy. So that conversation about fabrication has been really amazing, where they're building a three-dimensional model that is entirely accurate. They have like every single outlet, they have wires connecting the outlets, they have all the screws in the panels, like every little component that needs to be ordered or have on the supply chain for them is completely quantified. And that process of like, we're working out basic design ideas with them, and then it's going immediately into a very high level of precision. And then it gets translated into cost information. That whole back and forth has been a really amazing process for us to be part of, and it's really contributed to making these things as efficient and cost effective as possible.
I'm interested to hear about how that actually works for you guys, if you're willing to share it, because there's this whole idea of architects doing design intent drawings, right? And then hand off, right, to the people who actually build it. And there's several steps in between. And so obviously that is getting shortened in this. And there's also kind of this ownership of all of those things and people taking the risk and responsibility of that up front to make sure that it comes out exactly how you want it. Like, seriously, design intent, right? It's like, no, this is exactly how we're going to do it. This is why we're going to do it, all those things. Before we get to that, though, it's just reminded me of a story with the talk about Atomic. I think it was like the U2 show, the tour, right? And it's a stadium show, like every night or two, right? And they have this huge schedule. And it was something like 8 or 18 semis worth of stuff for one show. And there were 3 of these crews that were leapfrogging each other, right? Because you can't just tear everything down and then be from Anaheim to, Sacramento in one day, right? That's a whole separate crew. And I was just kind of blown away by the idea of it's a machine times 3, because that's all of the logistics that are part of that. And also having some redundancy built into the system, right? Because they are tearing that thing down and they're going to go erect it again in another spot, which is different than what you guys are talking about. But I can imagine the point of view that Atomic brought to the table with the problem that you're trying to solve. They probably thought, oh, this will be easy comparative to setting up, all of these different shows and leapfrogging each other and the rigging. And there's so much kind of patching things together and then taking it back apart. And it has to make sure it goes back together again. So we can't break it, because if we break it and it gets there, it's broken, right? Like there's so many things that they are probably thinking through. It's like, oh man, this new thing there, you mean we're only going to put it together once? This is going to be amazing, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, they were excited. I worked with them for a stretch, like every summer while I was in architecture school. And then when I graduated, they called me up and they said, where are you headed? And I was like, I'm interviewing in architecture firms. They asked me what the salary was. And they said, well, can we double that and get you back here? And so I went, I said, yes. And so I went and I joined them for a while. But then I realized that as much as I loved doing that stuff, there was something about architecture that was just calling me back, right? And I think it's the permanence. In a lot of ways, the set design and all of that is the exact opposite of architecture. It's like unlimited budgets, got to build it quick, and then it's gone after 18 hours. And, it's the opposite. And so I had my calling, and frankly, a lot of the guys that worked there at Atomic, I think, were super psyched to do something with a little more permanence, right? And everybody got excited when we started talking about, hey, we're working with lenders that are going to offer people mortgages that nobody else can get. And this could be a housing solution to hundreds, if not thousands of people. And then it's like, okay, there's like a sense of purpose here. And so they got super psyched to, collaborate with us. So it's kind of like bringing these two worlds together and bringing the best of both of those worlds.
Yeah. And it's, you mentioned that kind of design intent drawings, and it's interesting. The relationship that we have with them is very different from that mentality. Whereas, with design intent and kind of separating your role from the contractor. And so you're always like the idea is that you're protecting yourself from liability, like in the background. You're all working together, but there's always this thing where I'm protecting my camp, you're protecting your camp, and so forth. And this is very different because we're essentially partners in the way that these manufacturing agreements are structured. And so it's like all hands on deck. We're all working together. We're not thinking that way. So it's just a lot more collaborative and sort of beneficial and quite frankly, like a really refreshing way of working.
Let's take a quick break to share more about our sponsors. My friends, I've got a new chapter in the Avail story to tell you about, and that is the newly released version of Avail Desktop 4.3. The people behind Avail continually strive to make things easier for you. Easier to find the information you're looking for, easier to get it into your preferred application, and easier to store it in your preferred cloud storage locations. Let's face it, I think we can all agree that easier is better. But they didn't stop there. They also care about what your experience is like. So, as always, they've kept their focus on visuals with an eye toward design and ease of use. You're probably dying to hear the details of what's new. Well, who am I to get in the way? So let's get right to it. Avail Desktop 4.3 will now feel like your own custom app thanks to keycards. Keycards are data-driven and create zippy new visual ways of organizing your existing content. Think of them like pivot tables for your content. Join the Avail Desktop 4.3 party in BYOS, or bring your own storage. Now you can store and deliver your content using Autodesk's BIM 360, Microsoft's OneDrive, Microsoft SharePoint, Google Drive, Dropbox, Ignite, and others. Avail's new Dynamic Paths feature also solves the problem of accessing content using desktop connectors like Autodesk Desktop Connector. Try it today. Either bug your admin to update your installation for all the new goodies, or if you aren't currently using Avail, go to getavail.com today to learn more. That's getavail.com. And now let's get back to our conversation. I'm interested in this fabrication process, and you mentioned this kind of hybrid approach with the cartridge system. Can you explain what's going on in the factory? And the reason I want to start there, and then I want to kind of work our way back into how it gets from the ideation phase to that phase via technology. So let's start at the end and just what explain more about the cartridge system and how, whatever you're willing to share about that, because I'm sure there's some IP locked up in there somewhere. But the idea of this approach and this kind of hybrid flat pack / volumetric approach that you have to get these pieces to the site that click together and build space. Because I think that's, again, just kind of, I'm sure a fabricator doesn't even think about it, or a traditional fabricator isn't going to think about it the same way an architect does, right? We think about it spatially and volumetrically, but then when it's there, it's like it's pieces, it's parts, it's assemblies. And I would just love to hear what you've experienced through this process. How eye-opening was it for you to be involved in that part of it, and how you kind of have reworked your process to make it so that the information flows in the right order, in the right way, and who was involved to get it to that piece so that it can be shipped to a site.
Sure. So yeah, Wayne and I can kind of tag team through this. The Wayne mentioned a few minutes ago this like very elaborate, comprehensive 3D model that's drawn, and that's super important because each individual piece is kind of tagged with a specific nomenclature and sequence for construction. And so a lot of the house itself is done on a CNC machine. So we're dealing with like sheet products like plywood, and that's a story in and of itself. Pandemic, plywood, Ukraine war, plywood. Like, we've gotten to a really good place with it, but it's taken a long time. But that plywood is run through a CNC machine, cut into all the individual pieces. In the case of the Via is actually a tiny home on a trailer, and we actually rip our studs and do the entire framing with sheets of plywood. And what's amazing about that is it's like a NASA level of precision. Like every stud is true. There's no nonsense with typical lumber, and then
it's totally stable.
It's totally right? Stable. It's unbelievable, and our pull tests, everything show that it's every bit as capable of a framing mechanism as lumber. A typical lumber. So anyway, all those pieces are made, and then the factory, if you can imagine it, it's like a series of stations. In the case of the Via, the trailer rolls in, and then we start building the base floor, build up, insulation, all of that. Then it moves to the next station, the walls go up. Then it moves to the next station, and the cladding starts happening, and then the next station, and the interior finishes start to be made. We actually make every one of these houses all the way through in the factory, and we have third-party inspectors that are there performing the inspections requisite for each place where the house is going to end up. In the case of the Vias, it's a little different because it's considered a vehicle, and like an RV or trailer that just happens to have a house on top of it, which is pretty interesting. And then the houses, the connexus, that we need to identify the municipality of where that's going and have everything,
Could you try again?
My watch made an appearance on your podcast. So the connexus houses, like we build all the way through. We've got to have the inspections where they look in the walls and make sure the rough-ins are done properly, all the plumbing, the electrical. So that's all done. And then when we deliver it to site, you'll get a final inspection for sign off. And so yes, the factory is interesting. It's great. Like you visit there, you see each one, like the connexus and the Via from the very first moment all the way through. And right now with you, we've got a decent amount, going through, but the full production numbers will start in January, where we're belting out hundreds of them. That's exciting, like working our way up, because we've got to train people and we keep bringing in the next group or station in production and scaling it up. And again, we wanted to go super organic with our development, unlike a lot of our competitors do this like big investment like scheme where millions are invested and 5 factories are built at once. We're like, that scares us. we want to scale up and like grow our audience like very organically and do it on terra firma. And we've diversified, and we've got orders of a few thousand that are giving us a nice kind of foundation to begin expanding, and so like we think we've done this very responsibly and sustainably, and
to build a real business. Yeah, that's in. Wayne, is there when you saw this stuff happening, and probably talking to it way ahead of time, but was there something that opened up your mind to how this could be done when you saw it in action, or just talking to the fabricator like ahead of time, that really unlocked some new ideas for you guys when it came to the approach you were going to take?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many conversations about every little detail in terms of being able to do all the connections, make sure that everything went together tightly and seamlessly, and a lot of that, the level of precision, integrating the CNC and all of that is incredibly important in that whole process. So there's, just kind of endless back and forth with the fabricator. And a lot of, just, it's not just like a normal detail, like where the roof comes down and meets the wall. It's like, okay, we got to do that. We got to be able to take it apart and put it back together and still have it be waterproof. And it's quite tricky. So, and then there were details that evolved in terms of how, like, say, the roof panels come together so that it can be picked by a crane or a telehandler and put into place. And then,
what's a telehandler? I've never heard that before.
Telehandler is like it's like a little sort of rolling piece of equipment that's got it's kind of like a crane on wheels. It's kind of in between a crane and a smaller piece of equipment. But so that there was that level, but then also on the more macro level, I think what was really interesting about it was seeing how that kind of thinking translated into how space could be configured. So when you're dealing in the cartridges, it's like you're not so constrained. Like typical volumetric modular always bumps up against certain dimensions. It's what can fit on the thing to go down the road, how long can it be, and how those things connect. In this, because you're dealing in smaller pieces, you get onto site, you can keep extending this thing. You can make a house that's twice as long, and it's no problem. Or you can stack them, get 2-story solutions. You can get all kinds of different configurations. So it was just interesting to see how thinking through little details ends up translating into whole concepts of how space can be organized and be built very quickly.
Yeah, that's super cool. One of the things that I want to get to the tech side of things, like the design process, but this whole factory kind of assembly and assembly line kind of thing. One thing that was kind of eye-opening for me was this idea that, in contrast to the traditional construction process where trades are sequenced on site, and somebody gets pushed back early, it just pushes everybody back, and there's kind of like that side of it, and then everybody has to have their own tools, and the materials have to show up right before, and like all of these logistics that are like cascading effects of logistics and sequencing. Whereas in a factory, there's still some of that, right? You need the materials there. You've got to have kind of this, storage space, or maybe they don't. Maybe they get it just in time or whatever. I can only imagine during the great plywood pandemic. But this idea of like there is the shop tools, and somebody just shows up to work. They're a contractor and they're an electrician, but they show up and everything's there, and they don't have to own all that stuff themselves, and they don't have to make it sure that their truck is locked every night in front of their house, and they are showing up to a job every day because this line just keeps going. And so there's other issues to solve here, right? Like, how do we keep stuff moving on the line, and how do we ensure that they actually have the next project is coming when they're finishing up on the one that's moving through. But the way that it was explained to me was like there's way more peace of mind in doing this kind of contracting work for those guys who show up to that building every day to build these things. It's just a side tangent, but just interested to hear what you guys kind of, if there was anything like that came out of this process for you that really made sense from a productizing architecture standpoint, and the other kinds of jobs it creates and things like that in the industry.
I mean, I was just going to say that, it's quite different in our factory because the guys are all employed there. They're not really subcontracting out the work. So those sequencing issues, which are like of incredible importance on a normal construction site, there's a lot more flexibility in terms of how that's managed. And then they're also, you're going down the assembly line, so you can be working on plumbing over here, you can be doing electrical over here, framing there. So there's a lot more efficiency with that, or just dealing with contractor scheduling and so forth. So that's been nice to see that.
In addition to all the logistics you were talking about, like getting new construction site tools, all this stuff, I think not only is there the efficiency of kind of the workforce that's there and a controlled environment that you're getting a better product, but one of the most startling things was we recycle every piece, like every leftover piece. So there's no waste at all. It's like all the little extra pieces of plywood, all the extra pieces of metal, every piece is recycled. And so you're talking about an approach to construction in which the waste generated is less than like 10% of a standard construction site. And when you start multiplying that by like hundreds and thousands, it's just like, oh my gosh, the amount of like energy and waste differential, and that you're building higher quality in a controlled environment. You've got workers that are generally happier, healthier. It's like, it's win-win-win. So that part has been eye-opening for us. It's like, whoa.
I was just going to ask, is there still the trash talk on the construction site inside the factory? I want to know.
There's a lot of poaching that happens. That's for sure. There's a lot of like contractors out there that like try to grab these guys from our shop. So, but yeah, there's definitely trash talk. Yeah, there's always going to be trash talk where there's building.
Yeah.
So let's get into the tech and the process and things like that. If anything you guys are willing to share about, this disrupting kind of the traditional sense of producing drawings to get a permit and then handing that off and protecting our interest as a practice and then handing things off. There's certain things that are said, there's certain things that are not said. One of the things that's really interesting about the traditional architectural process of design, bid, build, right, is like the drawings are done to get the permit and to do the pricing, but it's not designed for a contractor, right? It's still kind of a loose instruction set that's design intent, because there's this real hands-off, and obviously there's so much history here about means and methods and things that architects just won't touch. This is a totally different thing, right? And so how did you guys approach that process, and how did you implement like what you have implemented to change the way that you do it?
I think on that question, it really comes back to that sort of partnership that we have with the fabricator. That design, bid, build process, it has a lot of potential issues, and one of them is quality, because it favors a process where you're selecting the cheapest bid, for different trades in order to meet a price.
Substitutions of materials and who's available when and all of that stuff. Right? And
then sometimes you don't really know is this subcontractor of the right kind of quality level, or what kinds of issues are going to result from that situation. And I think what's so comforting about what we have in place is we already know in the background that that's resolved. And so what it becomes about is real conversations about where value can be assigned and gained in that process. And it becomes a collaborative conversation. It's a completely open book situation. Like there's sometimes you have a completely open book contract in traditional architecture, and sometimes you don't. And even within the open book setup, the subs tend to be closed. So everything is completely open, and it just makes for a much better back and forth process, and that sense of like ownership of drawings and stuff. It's much more fluid here, and I just think it really helps the whole process, and then everyone gets a better product in the end.
I've been through several design build projects where it's like the idea of we're all on the same team is stronger than design bid build for sure, but it's probably not the level of what you're talking about. So I can totally imagine that, like, we're just going to call and get the answer, and we're going to work through this problem together, no matter where it shows up, and because this is all our product.
You had mentioned something about just like how is this still serving the profession when you started the question, and our thought is that we have kind of a library of these cartridges, right? And so that an architect still has some flexibility to make something that functions for kind of the different families and different priorities of living. If the architect's not live, like you can use your own architect to kind of take this kit of parts and assemble it and position it on the site. So there's still
There's a website like called IKEA Hackers or something. That's what it sounds like to me is going on.
Yeah.
Like taking traditional IKEA furniture and this piece actually fits over here, and you can make this cool Frankenstein piece out of it.
I've seen that, like hacks, like really, you take the IKEA carcasses and then you do like beautiful doors and drawers on it. So yes, in essence, like there's still flexibility, and as we evolve as a company, we'd love to grow that library to bring in more flexibility, so that architects still have kind of a vested interest in using this system. But again, it takes away the difficulty and the kind of out of reach quality that working with an architect typically has for most families that are looking to buy a home or build a home.
I get the sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys are doing design, and then you are handing this to Atomic, and they're like, you're doing some kind of level of design intent. I don't know how detailed that gets. I would love for you to fill in the details. And then they're taking it and doing the every screw in the model kind of thing. And then that's going to fabrication. Is that what it's like, or is it something else?
It's been a little bit different. Like some meetings will have something that's completely developed and it's very easy. Atomic still redraws in essence because their drawings really tend to focus on the fabrication elements, right?
Yeah, which is totally different. Yeah.
And
right.
then there's other ones where they kind of challenge materials that we've put forward and said, wouldn't it be easier to do it this way? And so it's every instance is a little bit different. I think the VIAs tend to have a lot more like versions available because they're not like pieces that you plug together. We're delivering them assembled. And so with that, Atomic, we've led the charge with like, 3 or 4 of them, and they've led the charge with 3 or 4, and we kind of come back together, but it's been very collaborative. And we've tried to make it as efficient as possible. And we really, nothing beats face to face. And we try to make, and I think they push us to come down and just spend 2 days at a time down in Pennsylvania factory. And like, we're out on the floor, we're back in the meeting room, we're on the floor. Like we're, constantly drawing and meddling and trying to find better ways. So yeah. So I hope that answers your question, but it's always a little bit different depending on the topic or issue at hand.
Yeah, and there's been some fun moments where we'll design something, they work up their model, and they'll say, this is a lot easier to build if we do this, this, and this, and then we're like, no way, because then the windows aren't going to be aligned or whatever. And that used to really annoy them. But over the course of time, it's become where like now when questions are raised, they're like, well, we really think we should line this up, or this should all be even. Like all the sort of qualitative thinking that we were doing at the beginning, now they're bringing to the same
Nice.
equation. It's been a fun evolution.
That's cool. Very cool. I love this idea of finding better ways and working through all this together. And that to me is a paradigm shift in kind of thinking for traditional architectural, because of that like siloed approach and risk aversion and protecting all of those different pieces of the puzzle and being very independent. This is breaking down those barriers. And I can just see the iterative process kind of working throughout the whole thing. It's very cool to hear. So when you guys, let's just talk about tools. Are you guys comfortable talking about the tools that you're using? Yeah, I would just love to kind of hear the rundown of what tools you're using, how you're using them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in our studio, in DXA Studio, or the live side, we use a lot of sort of AutoCAD and Revit at the beginning of the project. And that's because, a lot of the consultants in our world are all on those platforms. And for the Atomic side, they're more tapped into Vectorworks as a platform. It's more common in the stage set industry. So what we've been doing is, at least initially, we would start in Revit and then give them the files. They would convert them and work on it on their platform. Now we're also doing it where we have some copies of Vectorworks, so we can go back and forth more readily. So yeah.
Yeah, with other tools, we've made little 3D printed models chipboard models. I mean, that's what we learned at Virginia Tech. I did way more models than drawings. Like everything was, studying. So we've done a lot of that. We've done a ton of mock-ups down with Atomic. These guys love to destroy stuff. And so they do little mock-ups of the roof. Daniel called me in the middle of the night one time and said, hey, by the way, the house just withstood the strongest winds ever experienced on Earth. So that was nice.
On purpose?
Yeah, on purpose, right? Yeah. So to have that type of like meddling and playing around, we're big believers in mock-ups. I mean, you want to learn if something works or see it spatially, the mock-up is a really important kind of tool in the arsenal.
You guys are offering two different product types, right? You've got this kind of prefab, the cartridge system that becomes a fully permitted house, right? And then there's this idea of the via that sits on a trailer frame. So a lot of tiny houses that we see don't fall under traditional building codes, right? So just break down a little bit about your perception of both of those. Do you favor working on one over the other? Why, if so?
Well, we started with the Connexus because we saw, I mean, that's where our heart was at the time. And we built a Connexus, our first prototype, and it's sitting in a beautiful, like bucolic cornfield in Pennsylvania. And we just started getting lots and lots of calls about it. Like, where can we get one? And one of the calls that came in is another one of our partners, Abby at Tiny Estates. And Abby has been a pioneer in this of tiny homes. And she basically said, if you're manufacturing these Connexus models, do you have the capacity to manufacture tiny homes? Because most of the manufacturers of tiny homes are like small shops, right? Where they build one or two a month. And then they're back ordered for like 2 or 3 years. And so we thought, oh, this is interesting. And Atomic was very interested. Hey, why don't we do this? And so we did it, and we borrowed a lot of the kind of material and technology and approaches that we were doing on the Connexus to move it forward really rapidly, because Abby was quite interested in getting them to her customers as quickly as possible. And so that has just taken off. I mean, the Via, we kind of had it the other way around. We thought the Connexus would be the really successful one, but it's a longer gestation period. I think when you're doing a replacement to a, more traditional home, that takes way more planning and the financing side of it and everything. So the tiny homes have moved very fast, the Vias. And they've been fun. And one of the aspects of the Via that we weren't aware of before we started was this dynamic that people can buy these and have a mortgage less than monthly rent and build equity in it. And then when they go to sell, they have high resale values. So there's a prospect that you can buy one of these things, live in it for a few years, and then sell it for maybe the same price that you bought it for.
And take it away.
Yeah, or keep it and move it to another location. And so, man, that opens a ton of doors. I mean, that is the prospect of creating a whole new home ownership class with this type of solution is incredibly exciting for us. And so that partnership with Abby has been just like with Atomic. It's been eye-opening and symbiotic and thrilling. And then on the Connexus side, the people that we've been talking to, a lot of them are states that are interested in buying hundreds of these and helping people recover as a disaster relief. There's kind of two types of disaster relief. There's one that's the FEMA trailer that's right after a disaster, and the other replacing homes and not taking 2 or 3 years to do it. And so
and the other thing that you see happen in that circumstance, like California wildfires is a great example of this, is all of a sudden everybody needs a new house and everybody's priced out of getting a new house, because when there's that kind of demand, the prices shoot up and then nobody can afford to replace their house. Right. So this is a huge
100%. And so conversations with places like California Florida, and Texas, and the state of Maryland, in particular, those 4 places, like the prospect of that making a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, and selling those in quantity is a kind of an ongoing process. So it's kind of very different, and just like any sort of adventure in life, the reality, like where we are right now, is much different than where we thought we were when we started. So the kind of adapting and the agility to kind of deal with these kind of different opportunities has been like kind of one of the most exciting parts of the experience so far.
Yeah, and they're both really fun to work on. They're very different mentality, but it's like the tiny house, like trying to figure out how to work with the trailer, how to work with the weight transfer, where's the best place for different programs, and then create different models where we have a 24-foot the whole way up to 32, and now we're looking at longer. Thinking of that as like a self-contained unit, and then that connects us with all this flexibility. And then like you're saying, the rules being different. It's kind of fun to have both, to be able to go back and forth, because sometimes someone thinks that they want the Connexus, but ends up saying, oh, maybe the Tiny's better, or the other way around, depending on price and a whole bunch of other factors.
The other thing that's pretty exciting, Evan, is that we mentioned that most of the people building tiny homes are maybe it's almost like a do-it-yourself quality construction. A lot of them are like glorified sheds. And so to actually have architects designing these and bringing building science, building technology, like having like superior R values, energy performance, what we're offering is totally different than what's out there. Like this is like,
I don't know what you mean. I've got a 23-foot travel trailer. Those walls have to be like an inch.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Forest River. The technology has not changed in the last 50 years. About it's light and cheap as possible, right? So,
100%.
Yeah. I love that the whole idea of the range and the kind of the different opportunities that present themselves by working on these different types of projects. Just maybe last section that we can get into here is, I mean, I would love for you guys, if you're willing to kind of share pricing and stuff of what it actually takes. And I'm sure it's all over the map because it's the modular aspect of the Connects. But this idea of designing for very tiny spaces is probably very different than designing for something that can be added onto or modular in a different way. Like this idea of tiny houses, like I can only imagine kind of the psychology for the owner of what it takes to get rid of all their stuff and move into one of these places. And then what's it's actually like. Do I have to move this just to sit at the table? Do I have to collapse the table into my bed every night like I do in an RV? But there's like a level of design that comes to bear here that architects have not traditionally tackled, right? And so how was that? To me, like that's probably one of the coolest design problems there is, right? And so I'm just wondering from your guys' standpoint, when you're designing the Via, how different was that and how exciting is that? Or is it not, is it really difficult?
I found it crazy exciting. I think one of the best architecture professors I had in the undergraduate program at Virginia Tech, his name was Jay Steckel, and he would sail, and he was constantly referencing boat design and thinking about architecture, right? That any thing on the boat had 2 or 3 or 4 reasons why it was there, why it looked the way it did, why it was built the way it was, and that kind of analogy and that approach for the Via was absolutely like every move we made. Like, why does it need to be this? Why does it need to be here?
Super purposeful.
Everything purposeful and crazy intentional. And there's an element of conservation to it, right? Like knowing that in order to downsize, the ergonomics need to be there. And in both cases, like we use certain design devices to make things feel much larger. So it's like a perception based experience. So even though these are small places, they feel generous. They feel bright. They feel warm.
It's It's like Disneyland. It's like you just get a 5/8 scale
Yeah.
toilet and the bathroom seems huge.
Exactly. In Main Street, exactly. So, but they genuinely feel good. I mean, we had concerns when we were developing it. We built our first prototype. Like, is this going to feel as good as we think it is? And we were delighted when we walked in, and it did. It was just like you know, like a validation of a hunch. And yeah, so I think that's the case with the Via, but I think the Connexus is more like a typical home. We were able to give dimensions that are like commensurate with, like, you know, standard homes. So it's not too, there's not too much of a sacrifice in those. So, but again, they're very different products. When you ask about pricing for those, the Vias really starts around $90,000. And that can go up. But we started a 24-foot model, and now we're offering 24 to 32 feet. Pretty soon we'll be offering a 40-footer. And so that goes 90 to, like, I think 125 to 135, depending on dimension, finishes, all of that. And then the Connexus, we're reverse engineering. We had a starting price of 150, but we're getting in the neighborhood of about 125 now to start with the 1-bedroom. And then that can go up infinitely. That can go up to 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. And so you get into, you know, the 200,000 and 300,000, you know, range for pricing. But what's beautiful about the latter, the Connexus, is that you can start with a 1 or 2 bedroom and add on to it whenever you want. And so we think that should be appealing to a lot of buyers as well.
I'm interested in this whole mortgage set of things too. I mean, maybe final version of the podcast is this. I imagine with the tiny home, it is not a traditional mortgage, right? Is it? I mean, that to me, because unless somebody has cash, let's pretend for a moment that somebody doesn't have $90,000 laying around. How do they go about purchasing these? And I guess that question goes for the Connextech too. I kind of assume that is more of a traditional mortgage, and construction maybe a part of that loan as well.
Yeah, I was going to say with Connexus, yeah, that can be a traditional mortgage. With the tiny home, there's a national organization called NOAA, which certifies the tiny homes.
NOAA.
And once you get that certification, you actually can get financing for the tiny homes. So that opens it up, you know, for a lot of different people. You don't have to have that 90,000 sitting around. So.
Yeah, and you guys build all of this in the shop in Pennsylvania, and then do those tiny homes get trailered to wherever they're going to go? And
exactly, okay. Yep, exactly it. So yeah, and so we've established partnerships with 2 lenders. They're different lenders. We have Rocket Mortgage, which gives like a preferential rate. Familiar with the product inside out for the Connexus, and then through our partner Tiny Estates, they're able to offer financing for the Vias, and so I think so far almost everyone that we've sold has been with financing. And I've been reading recently that there are a number, because of the housing crisis, there's a number of lenders looking at zero down mortgages. And so that looks like something that might be available in the not too distant future. And hopefully we can bring that, you know, to our buyers. So we're constantly trying to make it, again, more accessible for people.
I'm going to append a final to my previous final comment. So this is the triple final comment in the under the idea of we need more of this. We need a lot more of this. Like you said, there's housing crisis. Crisis is not a word to be taken lightly. So you guys have bitten this off. You're taking this on in the Live Connected world and the DXA Studio world. But we mentioned earlier on in the conversation that there most architects, if not, you know, let's just call it that 90% of architects are not pursuing this, and they're leaving a lot on the table. So maybe in a final, part of the conversation regarding inspiring others to take the move to get into this, and in the openness of this conversation and this podcast and what it actually takes to do that. Are you guys open to having conversations with others about how to do this? One of the things I loved about about Musk and Tesla is like he open sourced, the design platform. It's like, we need more of this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the IP available, right, to anybody who wants it, because that we're not trying to protect it so that we're the only electric car manufacturer out there. We need more of this. Our goal is to electrify automobiles, right? So I'm just wondering your approach. Are you willing to have those conversations? Are you encouraging others to have this kind of an outlook and this kind of approach and to go in this direction, business model wise, professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, without question. I mean, we do believe it's the future for many, many reasons. And we would encourage people. I mean, I think given the response that we've received in launching in mid-June to now, and we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of potential orders, there's no way that we can do that alone. All we can say is there's ample interest in a very receptive audience out there, and more than enough opportunity to go around for many more people to get into this space. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is we see opportunity moving beyond just the single family approach that we're doing with the Connexus and Via now. And like, we've got ambitions to get into multifamily versions of this, where these cartridges can plug into existing commercial buildings and convert them to residential. I mean, look behind us, like is Manhattan, and there's whole pockets of this city that are just sitting there vacant, like the office space. The idea that you could convert that, and that's going to take way more than just live connected doing that. There's so much opportunity for people to help take on the housing crisis head on. So yeah, absolutely, we would totally support that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just a lot of your questions earlier about this kind of evolution of a thinking with traditional models and the way that that's been done in the past. I think what we're seeing is we have the ability to streamline things. There's so much excess, there's so much unnecessary complexity and waste in the way that things are done now, between like the design process or the construction process, and ultimately the users pay that price at the end. So to challenge these traditional models is a very refreshing exercise, and just something that really needs to be done.
There's some stat, global floor area is projected to double by 2060, and the equivalent of building an entire New York City every 30 days for the next 30 plus years is insane to think about. You guys are sitting in the middle of it right now, right? You're in Manhattan, and that just if you've walked through Manhattan, you understand maybe more than most people what the scale of the problem actually is. And the mentality of many, many firms out there is one project to the next, right? And then not thinking about this from a scale standpoint that needs to be addressed. There is plenty of work for everyone. I think that's kind of my big message here with where we're ending off is, so let's not be stingy. Let's move into these other ways and serve people in the way that architects can serve people and solve these kinds of problems and bring better design to the market, right? Because by productizing architecture, you're giving people who never had an opportunity to buy architecture before with the traditional model, the opportunity to do that and get the meaningful living and outcomes that great design can contribute to their lives, and they can then pay that forward, right? In their job, in their families, in their communities, and all those things. So to me, like, there's so much potential here with very little downside. And you guys have proven that you can do this, and you're growing it organically. You're not trying to be the next Katera and get billion-dollar valuations and get all this VC money that needs a 10x or a 100x return. You're building it organically, and you're proving it as you go, and you're showing that it's a very viable business and solution to address the problems that we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. I think that was an articulate way of expressing kind of the thing that's most exciting for us about this venture. So yeah, I don't think I could say it any better.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Wayne, I would love it if you could share where people can follow along with what you guys are up to. I'll put all the links to everything in the show notes so people don't have to remember all this, but I do want them to hear it. Where can they follow along with what you all are doing at DXA Studio and Live Connected.
Yeah, so at DXA Studio is simply dxastudio.com, and Live Connected is liv-connected.com. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth, and would love to share our platforms with you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. It was a very important one. So kudos to you and what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you to Avail for their support of this podcast episode. Visit getavail.com to see their holistic approach to content management today. This show is part of the Gabled Media Podcast Network. You can see all the shows at gabledmedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what I'm doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and of course, share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at trxl.co/podcast, where you can find every episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Just search for E. Troxel. Talk to you soon.